Hi guys, it's Kelly Latevola here, and I am super excited to be back to doing another video for Simon Says Stamp. We are heading into fall, and so I wanted to do a floral arrangement. We are going to be working with the hydrangea blooms, which is new, the Oh Happy Day, which is also new, and then an older set called Best Mom, because I really love these roses, and I love mixing my new and my old to kind of get a new look. So I always, when I'm doing a floral arrangement, I always pre-stamp it. And then I also kind of play around with what I want the colors to be to make sure that I'm going to like them together. This one particularly because I don't, fall colors are difficult for me. So I'm going to be using Intense Black by Simon Says Stamp and then also some Fog. The leaf petals that are included in the hydrangea blooms I love, but they're a solid stamp. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp them in the Fog and then outline them with a black pen so that I can use them and everything looks cohesive. So I'm just going to stamp and mask as I go. Everything's going to be, like I said, in that Intense Black because it's Copic safe. I didn't like that leaf in the top left-hand side being on top of all of the flowers, so I decided to switch that up, and that's another benefit of just kind of pre-gaming and seeing where you want your items to be. Because then like you can change it. I didn't feel the need to stamp everything out again. I just knew that for that one in particular, I wasn't going to be as leaf heavy. So, like I said, I'm using full sticky Post-it notes for my masks, and then I just stamped and masked as I went until I had something that I was happy with. I'm going to remove all the masks, which is like my favorite part. It's like a little magic. And then that outlining I was talking about, this is a EK Success journaling pen or writing pen, whatever you want to call it. As long as whatever you're using is Copic safe, you can go ahead and just outline them. And then there's also like little tiny branches. I outlined those as well. And then we're going to head into the Copic coloring. You don't have to be too particular when you're doing the outlining because we're going to go back over that later. For the hydrangeas, traditionally, when I think hydrangeas, I think of that blue periwinkle color with a little bit of purple, but they actually have like a deep dark purple hydrangea. That's the look I'm going for today because I thought that that would be the best for the color scheme that I was going for. So I'm going to use just the tip of my marker, light pressure, and flicking motions to kind of fill this in. You want to make sure you're moving with the shape of the petal. So if the petal pulls down like this one does, you want to go with, moving your lines down, or if it blooms out, you just kind of pay attention to those things. I tend to get a little heavy-handed if I start with my darks, so I start with my lights, and then I lay my shadows in with my lightest color. Then as I'm adding color to that, I never go above that the first time around. Also, with my darkest color, I try to pay attention, especially in something like this where there's a bunch of petals laying on top of each other. I try to pay attention that I don't add too much dark. I just really want the dark in the areas that will actually be the darkest. So once I go out to the dark, I go back into the light, and this time I'm moving the color a little bit further out along the petal. And that way it just kind of fills everything in nicely without me getting very heavy-handed. If you're not somebody who's heavy-handed with their darks, then you could probably pull the color out right from the beginning, but I've just learned over time that that's something I struggle with. The last color here, this is what's going to be what really brightens it up, is this V04. It's my favorite V, and I'm going to pull that from the tips of the petals in over all the colors, over all the coloring that we've done so far. And the reason is A, it's going to brighten everything up, B, it's going to blend everything together. And then for these particular flowers, the centers, when I looked at the photos, are actually like a light blue, which is super cool. Because you don't, traditionally you see like a yellow or dark orange. It's cool that it's blue. So, so that's what we're coloring it. I'm going to show you one more of these flowers. There are a lot of them. I'm not going to show you all of them, but I do want to point out that you want to pay attention, especially for stamps like this, like I said, where they're very compact and there's petals laying on top of each other. You want to pay attention to where those shadows would be. That's when it's going to give you good dimension and help your image look realistic. So this flower that I'm coloring right now, and I picked this one on purpose, is back behind like 3 other flowers. So the top left-hand side is going to be highlighted, but the bottom right-hand side is going to be almost completely in shadow. Now, I wouldn't just go in there with, my darkest color and just color the whole thing in, because you still want it to blend well as it moves toward the lightest color. But just know that not all of your petals are going to be shaded the same. And so sometimes it is a little bit more time consuming, but the result for me is totally worth it, because when you look at this image now, it just like pops off the page, where obviously everything in the back still looks super flat. These don't. So we're going to move on to the leaves. You'll notice that the spread on this is a YG to a G to a BG to a B. Don't pigeonhole your markers. There's no reason why, if colors blend together, why you can't use them. You don't have to use something just because it's a color family. The other things can work together. I wanted these leaves to have a more cool base, more of a bluer base. So I just added in some blue greens and some blues, and I tested it before I put it on my project. Always do that, especially if you're trying something new. But they worked really well together. I'm doing the same feathering. How about I speak correctly, right? Feathering motion. Doing the same feathering motion, but I am being very aware of varying the lengths. So you don't want all of your colors, all of your stripes to be exactly the same length. You want some variation, because in nature they would have lots of variation. And this is just going to help give it some texture, so it's not just like a flat leaf. If you don't mind the flat leaf look, you can still get some dimension just with your coloring. This just provides a little bit of texture. And like I said, if you're okay with that, then just leave that. You do you. Whatever makes you happy. And then again, I'm going to do the same thing, bring my lightest color in from the edge and flick that in to just kind of bring everything together. I wanted more white left behind, and because I was just going, I didn't really do that. So I'm going to go back in with my 0 marker. This is a colorless blender, and this lifts color. So I'm just going to go in and just flick kind of back and forth randomly to kind of lift up some of the color and get some variation. And then when I colored my other leaves, I didn't need to do that because I paid better attention. Here again, you'll see the color spread is from a Y to a YR all the way out to an E. There's it came out exactly how I wanted, exactly how I pictured in my head. So it was a good pick for me, even though they're just wildly across the board colors. This one, we're going to be doing the highlight just a little bit different. Instead of just on the edge of the petals, we're going to be doing the highlight in the center. These types of flowers, and don't ask me what their names are because I have a black thumb, for real. Like, people give me flowers and then the flowers get sad and they cry because they know that I'm going to murder them. I don't mean to. I think they're beautiful. I love them. I just love them to death. Anyway, these flowers have more striations in them. So I'm going to be doing less blending, where like with the hydrangeas, all of the color is blended out. Here, I'm going to want to keep the feathering just like I did with the leaves. So I'm going from the inside part of the flower toward the center, and then from the outside edge toward the center, leaving that white highlight. Make sure you don't get too heavy-handed and eat your white highlight up, because that's going to be part of what makes the flower so multi-dimensional, and it makes those petals look like they're kind of bowed out. As I'm going through this, on the edges, some of the edges are kind of raggedy, and whenever there is like a tear or anything, that's where I always want to put my darkest shading to just kind of emphasize that there would be a fold or a rip or a tear. That's just how the edges of these particular flowers are. And again, you want to put some shading at the bottom, but not so much that it becomes completely one color. So I have a tendency to put my darker shading more in the center or next to a leaf that falls behind. If there's a leaf that falls behind, I'll put more shading on the edges there. But the petals that are on top, you want those to have nice light edges to keep them segregated and have just really create really good dimension. But we're still going fairly dark with this particular flower. I wanted it to be like a burnt orange with a lighter yellow highlight that yellow just kind of brightens everything up. Fall colors are hard for me because I love the brights so much. I just love all the bright colors. So this is my way of kind of just sneaking a little bit of that brightness into a autumn bouquet. And I'm going to do the same thing to the two smaller flowers, and then we'll head on to the roses. For the centers of these ones, I just did very minimal shading. I picked a darker yellow and then a brown, just to do some shading at the base where it looked like the flower was facing away from. These R's, you'll see almost all of them are 20s, except for the last one. The last one is a 59. This, again, is going to be a different coloring technique than what we've been doing on either of the other flowers. We're just going to be doing lines. Here is a great way to practice having just really thin lines and using just the tip of your marker, because you still want the petals to be highlighted on the edges. That's what's going to separate all of these different swirls that are coming out of the rose. But I just keep going over the same line. That's my goal. When I'm coloring these, I just want to keep going over the same line. So I start with my lightest, work out to my darkest, but every single time I'm going over the same line. I'm not branching out into the rest of the petal. I am not doing any feathering or any other shading other than this one line. And the reason that is again, because I get very heavy-handed with my darks, and I want there to be highlight, because I want there to be variation between each individual petal of this rose. I did miss the part in the center, and here I catch it, like I didn't realize, hey, I'm not adding any shading there. That looks weird. So we're out to the darkest color now. And here I tried to pay attention. I followed most of the lines just like I did before, but there was some where two petals would meet. Maybe I added maybe a little bit more shading, because on the second time around, we are going to start to branch that out. So not so much where the flower is super tight and compact. We're not going to really branch out too much there, but especially here, like with this larger petal, we're going to start to bring that color out. I'm not being too careful about my lines or my shading because it's all going to blend out in the end. So it doesn't matter if it's not as smooth, if the lines aren't as smooth, because these colors blend so well together. If you have colors that maybe don't blend as well, you might have to pay a bit better attention. I just didn't need to. So you'll see how much of the white is left. That's what's going to be my lightest color. Your highlight color should be just very minimal. It should be exactly that, the highlights. And then it's, you can see how that kind of breaks it up, whereas if it was all dark, you wouldn't see the segregation between each petal. For these little branches that are kind of like the filler branches, I did pick a whole color family, and that worked for me. I picked the YG 90s. And I just did them one time. I colored them completely in with my lightest color, and then I just did little flicks of all of my other colors, making it darker where it was behind a flower or behind a leaf, and then lighter as the leaves came out to the edges and there wouldn't have been anything on top of them casting any kind of shadow. But really, I'm literally just doing one flick of each color on every petal. Again, you want to be light-handed. This isn't anything that if you decided to go 2 colors or 3 colors, it would be totally fine. It's not a big deal. I just always use 4, and that's what I do. So you'll notice when I had first stamped this, there was a lot of variation between the line thickness. The roses were thicker than the hydrangeas. The hydrangeas were very delicate. The way that I fixed that is by re-outlining all of my images. It's something that I do with all of my cards, whether there's a line thickness issue or not. It just brings it kind of together and makes it cohesive. So I did all of that and was very happy with the way that it came out. I'm going to be using the folded banner die from Simon Says Stamp. This is, again, it's a little bit older, but I love it. And I love it especially with floral arrangements, because it just feels like finished. Sometimes it's hard to finish off a floral arrangement if you don't have a container. This makes it feel finished for me. So I cut it out in Schoolhouse Red and then treated it with my embossing buddy, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp in Versamark ink. Once that's down, I am going to put on some white embossing powder. This again is from Simon, and I love the way that it looks. I'm going to clean up any strays that I have laying around there. The embossing buddy does a pretty good job, so usually I don't have too much of a problem. And then go ahead and heat set that. This comes with the score lines right on it, so I'm just reinforcing that with my bone folder. I opened it all back up so I could add a little bit of shading because I am obsessed with dimension. I have no idea what's wrong with me. But I used the R29 to just add a little bit of shading to where it would be folded over. You just want to be careful that you don't get any marker on your embossing because alcohol inks, which is what Copics are, will color your heat embossing. I'm going to put 2 rows of the Scotch foam adhesive to pop up this banner, and then I'll close it to tuck those little tails in, and it will stick to the part of where I've already peeled the tape off. And then I'm just going to use Tombow Mono multi glue on the little tails to adhere it down to the card flat, so that the middle part will be raised, the tails will be flat. And like I said, it finished it off really nicely. It brought in a third for the red, so that created that visual triangle. And then I had trimmed it down. I forgot to mention that. I did trim it down to 4 by 5 1/4. And then I'm just going to mount that flat on a white card base and call it done. So I did add Wink of Stella too. I forgot that. Sorry. I added clear Wink of Stella because I can't make anything without sugar. So that's the entire card. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you guys back at the end of the month for something a little extra special.